welcome everybody to Pop Culture. I am Scott.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Monica.
Withnail I.
Or Peter Marwood, if you really want to give the character his name, but he's only ever referred to as the narrator or I in the film.
Yeah, I think it was Marwood in the published script.
It is Marwood,
Yeah. Jason's pick for Cult Classic, and what a pick.
I'll just start by saying this is up in my top 10 comedies. Like, if I have to have a top 10, this is definitely sitting in amongst them. It's one of those ones which doesn't matter how often you go back to, it's still funny, it's still biting, everything. But I am interested to start because Monica had not seen it before.
No, I had not. And once again, I have to say thank you, Jason, because I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was really sharp, very funny. And to me, it's a really interesting film about a dying friendship.
It is,
more than
exactly
anything.
what it is, yeah.
It's just some of the observations in the film are just so sharp and still so relevant today. I think the sign of a good comedy is something that transcends time, and this film certainly does it quite effectively.
Yeah. It's semi-autobiographical, so the director wrote from his experiences. And
Bruce Robinson.
Yes, Bruce Robinson wrote from his experiences as being an actor and out-of-work actor and come director, writer, whatever he was doing. He was all part of the theatre crowd and film crowd. So he had this script floating around for a while, came across the desk of a member of a very small band called the Beatles, George Harrison's Handmade Films, and they produced it. So taking those risks that they do, which is a great thing. It's like, I have to say, George Harrison has allowed two of my favourite comedies of all time get produced.
Life of Brian.
Life of Brian. Yeah. It's just like, how could you do that and then create really good music? I mean, far out. That's a big impact on culture.
Very clever man.
Yeah. But the beauty of this film for me is just the performances are just so perfection. It's like, I know I'm not using really good grammar there, but it's so perfected, and the pathos of their performances lifts it way above what you'd normally get. I know it's something where you do actually feel a bit of an emotion for some of the characters, particularly because you can see he's struggling to sort of deal with this toxic friendship that he's got. Doesn't see his way out. He's eventually getting his way out, but Withnail's sort of not letting him and mistreating him too, I have to say. So it's
Withnail's a horrible friend.
Yeah, he is. But obviously, I is participating for some reason. It's sort of probably more out of just not knowing what to do with himself, which might be the case of a lot of out-of-work actors. What do you do between the takes?
Yeah, and I have to say, I was really surprised when I read this was Richard E. Grant's first ever film that he did, because the performance just screams of, veteran actor who knows exactly what he's doing.
Experience, right?
Experience hits all the beats. And I was just like, this is someone who's really, really good at his craft. And it just makes you appreciate it all the more.
Or he's not acting at all.
Or perhaps not. And I think that also comes back into the other performances as well. Paul McGann is wonderful as the, long-suffering Marwood or narrator or I. And, it's a wonderful contrast against Grant's sort of like eccentric, horrible Withnail. And then you also have Uncle Monty thrown into the mix as well, who is the strangest character I've ever seen in a movie.
I mean, Paul McGann's I'm going to refer to him as I because that's really what the title of it has. He's sort of so beautifully anxious and lost and almost like this weird innocent victim, but keeps going back for more. Like, I don't know why. And I don't think he does either, because you got that narration coming from him through the whole film. just right against Richard E. Grant, slamming down what I'd say is just it cemented his career instantly by having that performance. It is a tour de force of comedy in terms of a character who's this weird mix of narcissism and irresponsibility and
and damaged and
and it's
for sure.
and like, but all by his own hand. It's all like
absolutely.
Like,
and at the very end as well, you have Withnail go and do this monologue from Hamlet, and it's just so good.
It's perfect, and it's it's that he's the one who's staying behind with the bottle of wine because he's digging his own grave.
Yeah, and that's sort of the only way that he knows that he's not interested in changing that about himself.
Despite complaining about it nonstop.
He's
getting
one of those
parts and his agent not calling him, and
he's one of those people where all of his problems are created by somebody else. It's not his fault.
And then, of course, Richard Griffiths as Uncle Monty. That's just a classic character. I can see there has been criticism of the character presently, sort of putting gay men in a bad light. However, when you read back from the fact that it's sort of autobiographical and actually based on a director who sort of, I guess, cornered Robinson and did all of these sorts of things, I think we've got to be careful that we don't equate sexuality and things like that with a character who is just this character. And I don't actually find he's got sort of predatory behavior, but it's matched with this weird, genuine feeling of ignorance and depression and shame that gets mixed in with it. So I actually find there's a bit more to the character than just going, oh, look, they've made him a gay guy look bad, but it's not quite like that.
I think he's also under the impression that they're in a couple as well.
Like, Withnail sets it up too. Yeah. It's like, it's not.
And I guess more to the point, I guess the character of Monty would feel awkward because he's very closeted and he doesn't quite know how to interact with someone that he also thinks is another gay man. So I don't see it, again, as something, like you said, Jason, attributed to a person's sexuality. It's just someone who is really, really bad at approaching someone they're interested in. It's not okay, and it's certainly very predatory.
It's like 67, so he's carrying a whole lot of cultural baggage.
Yeah, and that kind of behavior is certainly not exclusive just to gay men. So.
So it's I think it still stands. I think Richard Griffiths does such an amazing job. I can't when he was Uncle Vernon in Harry Potter. It just I could not shake Uncle Monty from my head whenever I saw him. I have to say it's just Harry. so well done, that character. Yes, it changes it completely.
Suddenly, it's a euphemism.
But yeah, it's such a funny character, and people like that exist. It's as simple as that. So
I think independently, all three characters, for anyone who would be interested in acting, would be an excellent study for people to sort of learn their craft, I suppose, because you can see how each one is so different, but they also rely on, I guess, the time that they spend on screen with the other person.
Absolutely. Yeah, the synergy of it all is quite amazing.
They have a wonderful chemistry.
They bounce off each other really well. And it's sort of a shame that, like, Paul McGann's so good, and he's sort of, I mean, he's definitely done, a body of work, but it doesn't reflect his talent.
Yeah, he tends to be one of those actors that flies under the radar for a lot of people, which I think is a shame, because I do think he is extremely talented.
Whereas Richard Grant, probably the opposite. Like, has quite an impressive body of work.
Yeah, and does get all those kudos. Not that he doesn't deserve it, which he certainly does.
Absolutely. I mean, he's getting the Marvel movies and Star Wars movies and stuff now in his life.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would love to see Paul McGann in, like, the Star Wars universe. I think he'd do really well. Yeah,
absolutely. The other thing about the film that stands out for me as well is it's got this interesting take on the 60s, which feels far more honest than you normally get. It's even a little bit brutal, if you want, about the decade. It doesn't have that same sort of optimistic communal cultural revolution feel that you often have inferred in films that are set at the time. It just feels like this is genuinely really what a lot of people were like at the time or feeling, and that there was all these people just as lost and dispossessed or even unfulfilled by the situation as they were in, regardless of the time and what's happening at the time. So it just had that reality to it that I just really loved.
I think a lot of that also comes back to the fact that a lot of the movie does not take place in London. So you have those characters isolated in this sort of country town where they rub up against everybody else in that community. And it just shows that disparity between those two kind of lives.
Yeah, but we're in the time of like hippie culture and stuff, but the counterculture elements, the characters aren't sort of clean, free loving.
No.
They're bitter and
alcoholic, and
I
guess the only sort of brief feeling you get of it is with Danny, the drug dealer, coming in, and when he comes in, just the amazing lines that he spouts out.
Yeah, I love Danny the drug dealer. He's great.
He sort of also narrates that correction of the counterculture, hence the quote at the beginning. And quotable, this film is so amazingly quotable. I think a lot of people wouldn't know where the quotes came from. Like the stop clock is right twice a day sort of comments and things like that. And Danny's Camberwell carrot sort of conversation and so on. Well, why is it called that? Well, it looks like a carrot, and I made it in Camberwell, and so on.
Those are the sort of Windows faces looking like. Really.
Yeah, and also the scene with the chicken I thought was quite funny.
Yeah, you've got to throttle it before it makes friends with them. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
But to have all these sort of weird takes on it, and they're obviously coming from a bit of a privileged position too, I feel, and it's definitely laid out there. They've come from money, and they have those statements of "we've gone on holiday by mistake," which sort of, how can you do that?
Yeah, I think a lot of British films tend to fall into the trap of the banal struggles of upper middle class white Englishmen, and to turn it into a comedy just makes so much more sense than to take it seriously and have it some sort of self-reflective, whimsical, boring wank of a film.
Yeah. And I guess another nod to their privilege is the idea of drinking lighter fluid because it's more upper class than drinking meth. They can't afford it. That's why I'm drinking it.
So there's so much that goes so well in this film. It's hard to sort of bring all of it together other than to say, it's one of those films that I understand why it's on those lists of the top 100 films of all time. You'll find it often sits somewhere on that. And I do strongly suggest everyone goes sees it.
I second that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's one of those movies that you will not forget in a hurry.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a multitude of reasons. And I mean, the BBC named it one of England's greatest cult films. So,
and I'd say one of the greatest comedies.
It's a very effective comedy. Yeah.
Cool. Anyone else got anything else to say about Withnail and I?
I feel that if I keep talking about it, I just don't do it justice, to be honest. It's one of those ones where I go, you've just got to watch it. You have to watch it.
Yeah. I would just encourage people to watch it. Yeah.
Live the moment of it.
Tricky to get a hold of, but you're doing yourself a favor if you do.
Yep.
Withnail and I. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of Pop Culture. I've been Scott.
I've been Jason.
And I'm still Monica.